everybody. It's time for looking at episode 6 at Rings of Power. And I am joined here, as usual, by Pastor Brian. And we will give you our opinions on episode 6. We're getting closer to the end of the series, and I'm not sure when the new series is supposed to debut. I thought it was supposed to come out this October, but I haven't heard anything yet, so I'll have to double check on that. But in any case, I'm pretty sure I read that they finished filming at least before the strike this summer.
Okay, good.
But they did move production to Britain instead of New Zealand, so it'll be interesting to see how much difference we can tell just by looking at the background shots, or if they'll just use a lot of the shots they had before and mat all their mountains and stuff on from the way they were doing it before. I don't know. We'll see when we get.
Did they spend as much money this time?
I don't know what they spent on season 2. Season 1 is certainly beautiful. Everywhere you look, gorgeous costumes, gorgeous backgrounds, a lot of detail. I love on the Harfoots. Every time we see them in a different forest, they've redecorated their hair and their carts to skies, right? If you're in the forest and you got twigs in your hair, and they grew out this plains with these gorgeous wheat-like things. That's wheat that's decorating all your stuff. So I've loved those little details like that. But in episode 6, we're going to start off with orcs versus villagers, right? We saw in the last episode that some of the villagers went off to follow Adar because he promised that he would spare them if they would surrender and swear their allegiance to him. And then about half the people left. And, Arendir tried to comfort Theo there, where Theo's like, well, people left. And Arendir's like, well, half the people stayed, So we got orcs versus villagers. They come up to the first night of fighting, and they come into the keep, and there's nobody there. It turns out the villagers have pulled a little trick on them, right? They lock them in the keep, and they bring a tower down on their heads, at least to get rid of a few of the orcs that way. They almost get Adar, but he jumps aside.
So, I guess we're supposed to attribute that to elfin, genius or whatever, but that little half village, they did an awful darn good job there. That was a heck of a plan, and it worked pretty good. Yeah,
it was a good plan. It seemed to work exactly the way they wanted to. This is their first fight, really. I mean, they just sat here for the past 3,500 years while elves watched them from that tower. So they've never really been in a tower before, right? Because the elves were using it as their, base of operations to keep an eye on this one village or 2 villages of people that are left in the Southlands, and they're still paying for their ancestors sign up with Morgoth. So we get the first night. Looks like the villagers have done pretty good, but of course Arendir reminds them we got to go. Or I guess maybe Bronwyn actually reminds them we better go set up in the village now because the ones that are left are going to come tomorrow night. So we're reminded that these orcs cannot go out during the day. Which gets to be important later.
Yes.
So we go back to the village. We set up the second trap. And here's where the, switcheroo happens, where the second trap seems to have worked just like the first trap, but not so much. So this is where we discover that Adar has repaid the half of the people who came to follow him by making them the shock troops, and so they all get killed, or at least a lot of them get killed by invading the village. All the orcs. Now, I had a few orcs in there. I watched this time to be sure. So he sprinkled a few orcs in there to sell the trick, right? But a lot of these people who were out there trying to get the village actually were villagers. So, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was, and I almost wondered, was Adar using his elfin magic to make them unable to see that they were the villagers until after the battle or something like that, because those costumes were a little funny, that the villagers had on.
Well, it was pretty dark,
Yeah,
and they don't know what orcs wear, I don't guess.
Yeah.
So
that's true. Only a couple of them saw him in the back when they were trying to get him.
So that doesn't work out so well. Adar's pulled a trick on them. So once they've killed their fellow compatriot villagers, he lets loose with his orcs, and now the villagers are in big trouble. And Bronwyn gets shot, and we'll have these extended scenes of Arondir taking out the arrow and cauterizing the wound and all this. And she looks pretty good the next day for all that, actually. She's up and about, like she's got her arm in a sling, doing okay. I mean, these Southerners, they do seem to respond pretty well to having their shoulders cauterized at night. I'm thinking I'd be still with a fever and lying in bed for quite a while.
Well, elven healing, once again, don't forget.
Yeah. She does get a kiss there from Arondir in this episode. Yeah. And I don't know that that's going to go very far, right? Because after the first age, at least in the Silmarillion, we get the kind of direction from on high that we can't have any more of these elf-human hybrids. It just gets it's too difficult for the powers that be to consider what to do with them, which is why Elrond and his brother had the choice, right? You can be a human or you can be an elf, one or the other. You're going to have to pick, and they pick different sides. So his brother becoming the first king of Numenor, and here's Elrond, hanging around Gil-galad and those guys. And being one of the youngest elves, I mean, I saw an article today that said at this point, Elrond seems old if you're human, being around probably about 4,000 years at this point, close. I mean, he was born pretty close to the end of the first age. He was an adult when it ended. But so he's the little kid on the block, quite literally. He's like, 3,500 years old, 3,700 years old, and all these other elves are older. And of course, Galadriel, some magnificent number of years on her. So he's the little kid still with these father issues. His mom and his dad saved the world from Morgoth, and his brother goes off as the first king of Numenor, and he's kind of just clunking around Eregion, like being an errand boy for Gil-galad, So it doesn't seem like he's had the most following the family footsteps too well yet. But he'll do more later.
Yeah, he will more later, because that's how I knew him from later, and that's why it was hard for me to swallow the way he gets talked to. But I guess that does make sense if he's one of the younger ones. The older elves don't necessarily think that he has any worthy status yet or something, maybe.
Yeah, he's just, and he's half elven, really. I mean, he got to choose, and so he's an elf, but some of his ancestors are humans, and so, I mean, he's kind of an elf by default. He chose it. But the elves just they don't reproduce very quickly, which is good, or the world will be overrun with elves quite quickly, right? They reproduce like humans do. You have these Galadriel and Celeborn being married for thousands of years. They have one child, and that Turgon and his wife had one child. I don't think Gil-galad had any children. I'd have to look that up, but Elrond ends up with 3, but the boys are twins, so his wife only got pregnant twice in the several thousand years they were married. So, there probably really aren't that many children in the so there's got to be a few, but I mean, like, the people that were younger than Elrond and Eregion, you could probably count on a couple of hands. He is still like at the kiddie table, so to speak. But we don't see him this week. We do not get anything with the elves. We don't get anything with the Harfoots. We don't see the dwarves at all. This is an episode of the Numenorians and the humans in the Southlands. So we get a couple of scenes of the Numenorians on their ships, at which point we find out that apparently Elendil's wife drowned. I have to look that up to see if that really is the way it went in Tolkien. I don't remember what happened to Isildur's mother. But drowning seems a very unusual fate for Numenorian. They are all about water and all about sailing, and the sea is kind of in their hearts, almost in the way it is for elves, like in the Lord of the Rings. Once Legolas sees the ocean and hears the cries of the seabird, he has this longing for the sea. It is awakened in his heart. He can't get rid of it, and it'll never go away. So the elves and the sea are kind of tied together, and now the Numenorians and the sea are sort of tied together. And you have Isildur wanting to go over the sea, and they have this, the sea is always right, So the sea is so central, water is so central to their existence and culture, that any of them that can't swim or get overtaken by, some water, you think would be unusual. I mean, not that humans can't drown, but you would see that Numenorians would be less likely to drown, being more, skilled at water things.
Until in the future, where Numenor, definitely a
Well,
lot of them drown.
well, yeah, but then we got Atlantis
No, I know.
style.
I
Yeah,
know.
earth sinking, water's going up to the top of the mountain. Kind of, yeah. No, yeah,
Yeah.
Numenorians can't, so probably even elves couldn't swim against that. So, yeah, when it's the wrath of the higher powers, you're just not going to get away. But it does seem unusual that Elendil's wife somehow
Those
succumbed to water.
those horse charges felt weird to me because of that, right? Like, because of course I think of Gondor, but I don't think of Numenorians as this big horse charging war machine. But again, I think of the sea, right? But it's a cool scene though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did think while I was watching it, not one of these people has been in a battle before, surely. I mean, we kind of look at Isildur and his friends, and they're like these, neophytes. But who isn't? I mean, Numenor's been sitting there at the tops of the planet. We're just like the most powerful nation, at least human nation, on the globe. And who's there to fight?
Yeah.
So they're kind of all newbies to the sense that who would, among any of them would have seen battle previously. But for that, they seem to have trained pretty well. They take out a lot of orcs. They manage to capture a bunch, and daylight, of course, helps. The orcs can't go out under the sun, so the attack at dawn. A lot of the orcs are going to be kind of trapped in the buildings then. So they kind of think they've tied it up, right? They've captured some orcs, and Elendil's going to take some folks out on a special mission. They're going to track down or I guess Galadriel's going to take some people out on a track down the orcs that escaped, and everything's looking cool, right? We've defeated the orcs, and everything's great, but not so fast, right? Now we do have some interesting scenes. To me, one of the more interesting scenes in the whole show, when Galadriel's trying to get information out of Adar. At first, he just sort of looks at her, and then she's like, well, basically, I could kill all those orcs that we captured, or I can take them out in the sun, and then he tells her whatever she wants to know, right? He cares about the orcs, and he does see them as his children. Now, we don't know how orcs reproduce. This is never explained, but he does see them as his children, and he does, for lack of a better word, he does love them, right? And so as soon as she's like, well, let's kill all your kids, he's like, what do you want to know? Right. So he's spilling the beans, and then she wants to know where Sauron is because Sauron's your master. And he's like, no, Sauron at the end of the war tried to heal the world. And then he starts talking about it, but then he started like trying to figure out whatever. And sometimes these characters mumble in this show, in this episode. I didn't catch all the words on everybody's lines. Because I'm like, what? Did you not like enunciate clearly on that one? So I'm not quite sure exactly there. He said something about when Sauron returns and starts basically experimenting on living orcs, which Adar has an issue with, clearly. And he's like, he killed enough of my children, so I killed him. So Adar thinks he's killed Sauron, and that he is free of any master. And so he tells Galadriel, I killed him. And Galadriel's like, well, you couldn't. And he's like, well, that's just because you don't think that an Uruk could have killed Sauron. And yeah, and we get Galadriel's kind of a bigot in this scene, right? She's like, I'm going to, she's so down on Adar that she's like, I'm going to kill every single one of your children. And when I've killed them all, I'm going to come to you and tell you, as I put a knife in your heart, that I killed every one of your children. And it's pretty cool. And you'd think she's looking at there are very few characters older than her in this show. He's going to be one of them. And if he was one of the original elves that was taken by Morgoth way back, the Lake of Cuvianen, at the very beginning, he is so much older than her. And he has seen a lot, and he's been tortured, and he's been twisted, and he's been forced to serve these horrible masters. And she has absolutely no compassion for any of that. All she sees is an orc, And it doesn't matter that he is one of these original elves who started out as an elf and was changed by evil. She's just like, I'm going to kill all your kids. And then I'm going to tell you I killed all your kids. And then I'm going to stick a knife in your throat or in your heart. And you're like, whoa, woman. I mean, damn,
Yeah.
So.
And again, when I think to the Rings trilogy, that's so different from how she comes across in that, right?
Yeah, she's kind of a one note here, and maybe we need her to be so that she misses the big reveal that happens in episode 8. So maybe in season 2 we will see her a bit humbled to realize that she was hoodwinked so easily because she was so driven.
Yeah, blinded by revenge.
Didn't stop long enough to think about things. And you think she might. Now, he's been trying to train her, right? Halbrand, a couple of episodes ago, was trying to teach her how to manipulate the queen, Well, think about what she's afraid of, and step back and don't constantly be like the dog at the end of the chain, but, be like, watch what's going on and decide, okay, what is she afraid of? What can I use against her? That's in her own mind. And he seems to have some political craft there that he's teaching her, and he's supposed to be this sort of lowly human dude. You'd think at that point she'd get a clue that maybe there's something more going on with this guy. She doesn't seem to. But he, is much more clever than she is at this point. And so I think at this point, anybody watching who hadn't figured out what's going on with Halbrand was probably being pretty slow. But we really put a big clue in here when Halbrand is about to try to kill Adar, and he's like, do you remember me? And Adar says, no. You get the idea, you're supposed to think that Adar's just killed so many humans that what's one more human? He doesn't remember this one in particular. But then he gets worried later, right after the interrogation scene, and Halbrand's walking out, and Adar starts to get kind of worried. He's like, am I supposed to recognize you? Like, who are you? And Halbrand just leaves. So at that point, again, it was like, okay, that's just like bing, 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 little arrows pointing at Halbrand. If you hadn't figured it out by now, you're being real slow. There's a big reveal going to come with Halbrand, and we've already told you what it is, basically.
I didn't catch all that energy, though, between them as much the first time through, whereas this time it seemed so stark, right? Like that moment, and just the terse words, right, don't really fit with how things are, in most of Tolkien. And so, yeah, this time I was like, I already had suspected Halbrand, but that exchange between the two of them, I didn't make that connection like, oh, yeah, duh. Like, this guy's talking about being free, and he's there having to hold his temper to maintain his disguise. Yeah, so I thought that was a lot more interesting the second time around. I a lot more subtext that I could pick up from that. Yeah.
So I think those scenes in this episode I thought worked really well. And I love those scenes. The fight scenes were okay. Again, they're shooting in the dark. And I heard complaints about this at the last science fiction convention I was just at, Archon in Collinsville, Illinois, in early October. People were complaining that why is it that people in Hollywood have forgotten how to shoot in the dark? All we see is darkness. The 4th episode of the Moon Knight series is exactly the same way. All these episodes under the pyramid are just dark. And you can't tell what's going on. It's like, why did you bother to even put makeup or costumes on these actors? You can't see them. You used to be able to shoot a scene where it was supposed to be dark. You got that it was dark, but there was just enough light to see the action, right? And somehow in the past few years, since Game of Thrones did it, and it was that nighttime battle toward the end of season, I don't know, 7 or something, where everything was just so dark and it was like, what's happening? I get that a real battle would be pretty dark, and probably a lot of soldiers have died with absolutely no idea what's going on around them because it got dark. But the audience needs to know, you're shooting this for an audience, and then they can't see it.
Yeah.
Why, people? Why?
as a theater producer, like, I'm forever screaming at my actors, like, if they can't hear you and they can't understand you, you might as well not be talking, right? Well, it's the same thing. And of course, it is a rule in theater. We throw blue light on at night. That tells the audience it's nighttime, right? We throw blue light on it. So I agree, and I'm forever struggling. I keep checking my brightness on my phone, and I'm like, is that bright enough? I can't see what's going on, but it's the production, and I get that, and I get, who does that a lot too lately is Disney and their Star Wars series. It's just so dark, and I can't see anything happening.
That seems to be the thing now, and I don't know why. Yeah. All right, so we get some dark scenes where it's hard to tell what's going on. But the Númenóreans come in to save the day right at dawn, kind of like Rohan, coming down in the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Rohan had come at last, says the text. So Númenor sweeps in here. We all think it's cool.
Galadriel do like all those acrobatics on her horse.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, she's been practicing for thousands of years. If anybody's going to be able to do that kind of stuff, it's going to be her, right? Yeah. So, it's cool that she clearly has skills. She's had a long time to develop skills. We get the great scene of the interrogation, which I just love, and then we get why this whole haft of the sword's been important this whole time. And somehow that I missed, probably in the dark, that human ends up with it, and it's the human, I guess, that encouraged half of the village to leave. He goes to the wherever and sticks that in the sword in the stone style, and turns out it's like a key, and he turns the lock and brings down the dam, and the water flows out, and somehow Mount Doom is downhill from everywhere else in the Southlands, which seems unlikely, but okay. And the water rushes to Mount Doom and sets it off, and now we have an exploding volcano. And of course, if you hadn't figured out by then, this is going to be Mordor, right? Yeah. But now you know for sure. But I do love the exploding volcano, the bombs, those volcanic bombs, as the rocks are being tossed for miles, and they're exploding and crashing into everything in the village. And I mean, you see where the $1 billion went, right? This production is gorgeous. The costumes are gorgeous, and everything is gorgeous. And now the exploding volcano and just the things blowing up around our actors, and it couldn't get any better, I don't think. I mean, 20 years from now, we already look at it thinking, oh man, those special effects, they might have been good for their time, but right now they're pretty lame looking, But hey, for 2022, when this came out, it's looking pretty good, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, and I mean, those of us of a certain age, we kind of know what a pyroclastic flow is after Mount St. Helens, right? Like, so that's I would never expect them to be so faithful to that moment, but it was definitely, it's a hold your breath moment, and it still catches me off guard. I think it's the cleverest way to make Mordor, and the first time it completely blew me away, but even this time through, it's just, I think, a very clever way to make it happen. I really like that. I think, was it Bronwyn's son who got the thing out to try and save her? Isn't that how it?
Well, he did, but I didn't know when the switcheroo happened, because then
I don't know how the switcheroo.
Because then he ends up with with this, what they think is a hilt wrapped up in this burlap, and it just turns out to be like a tomahawk, or a hatchet, and so it's somewhere someone switched it around, and I maybe I should have been looking a little more closely. But I didn't quite realize where there was an exchange, or maybe we didn't see it. And we just.
You're right, because I missed it both times. And both times I thought, how did that happen? And I don't remember ever seeing how that happened. I remember that. Yeah.
So I don't even know that when he thought he was betraying everyone and handing the hilt over to Adar, that he was handing a real hilt over. It hadn't already been switched. Maybe, I don't know. In the comments, if you all saw that better than I did, let us know where the switch happened, if we saw it, why we're being stupid and didn't see it. I don't know, but I didn't see it. But anyway, so the switch happened. The hilt was used to.
That's incredible. Yeah, that was awesome.
I guess Sauron or somebody knew thousands of years ago we were going to need a key over here so we could let loose the water from the dam to set off the volcano. I mean, it seems like there was some planning going on a long time ago to make sure this hilt was somewhere in the vicinity, right? Thousands of years later when we're going to need it. I don't know. It seemed, I'm not quite sure who
Maybe
planned all that.
Sauron sensed it, but no, that wouldn't be it either because that was before that. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So where did that hilt come from? It can't have been Adar. It's clearly like probably made by Sauron. Remember, Sauron's a smith, and smiths are almost always bad in Tolkien. I don't know why. Did he get ticked off in real life by somebody who was a smith? But he only hates some smiths, right? Sauron and Sauron and sometimes Aule. They're all, and of course, the big bad smith of Fëanor, and then Curufin, his son, and then Celebrimbor, his son. And I was looking at something else today. It said that when they were asking that guy how he's thinking of how to play his part as Celebrimbor, and he's like, well, his grandfather was Fëanor, and that's nobody you wanted to emulate. And his father was Curufin, and he was a bad guy too. So, but it says in the text that Celebrimbor's was like completely unlike his father. So I was gonna play him different, but also kind of like insecure because of his family lineage. He's the grandson of the guy who kind of got all of this rolling in a bad way. He made the Silmarils, and he made these Palantir. He was this great smith that no one's ever going to do what Fëanor did. But then he and his sons kind of wrecked the planet, in their quest to get those Silmarils back, and their oath that just ate them up. And so here's a grandkid going, Dad and Grandpa were kind of like not nice elves. I don't feel like people to like me.
Yeah, he's eager to please. Although he gave me creepy vibes from the beginning, and he was also a suspect for Sauron to me for a while because he just always gave me creepy vibes like he was hiding something. And I guess he was because they had that plan and didn't tell Elrond. But
right. We're using Elrond to exploit his friendship with the dwarves without knowing it. Hopefully, him knowing that we're exploiting his friendship with the dwarves. Yeah, they were keeping secrets from him. That little kid, he's wet behind the ears. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna say the creepy vibes for me don't stop with him. It's like almost all the male elves, just because the casting, these men look so odd.
You're right.
It's Elrond, it was Finrod, it was Celebrimbor. It's not so much Gil-galad. He doesn't look creepy, as I said. He just looks like a middle manager who was overwhelmed and doesn't know what to do. Like his bosses on the 6th floor have finally noticed him and not in a good way or something. He just always looks like, oh, am I going to get fired today? I go into my office. The male elves, I just don't know what the casting was supposed to accomplish by casting these men with similar, very interesting bone structures that just seem not elvish.
Right.
But, I can't say they're doing a bad job acting. They just look weird. And probably hasn't been helped with the pointy ears and some of the makeup and stuff either.
Yeah.
But especially the guy who played Galadriel's older brother, if he's not one of the creepiest looking men on the planet, at least in those scenes. I mean, come on. Maybe he looks normal in real life, but as an elf, he just looks strange.
I was ready for like a big stud hero in that, and then he just looked so weird.
It's been an odd choice. They
have these weird square jaws, which I love the square jaw, but for some reason on them, it just doesn't fit with their pale skin and their pointy heads. Or I don't know, they just look funny. Yeah.
It's like I put in one of the other episodes, a shot of Hugo Weaving as Elrond and Lee Pace as Thranduil. I mean, you're not going to get more like foreboding and beautiful than Lee Pace with the long blonde hair. It's like, damn. That's an Elf King right there. But these guys are like, I don't know. They certainly don't look like they have this sort of gravitas as someone who's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And But okay.
Well, and who was the hottie that was Legolas in the trilogy? He's always really hot, but like beautiful, like almost painfully beautiful guy. That's what I think of with elves. I think they're kind of almost too pretty to be, masculine, but just freaking drop dead good looking. Yeah.
It's supposed to be in an otherworldly way, right? Like they just don't quite. It's like a beyond human sort of beauty that humans can't attain, right? Something unattainable. That's why humans and elves aren't really supposed to mix, because then we get jealous if they're immortal and beautiful. We want to be like them, and that's not our fate. But the elves in this, at least the male elves, are just kind of like, okay, casting people. I'm sure these people are great actors, but the look is odd. But we've gone on about that before. So Galadriel then and Halbrand have this interesting heart-to-heart in the woods. And probably not necessarily one of my favorite scenes, but maybe one of the more important scenes, because here she is telling this guy, whatever Adar did to you and your people, whatever you're like bringing in from the past, you should just let it go. Like she's let anything go, first of all, right? She's the only elf that's like hunting Sauron, still. And here she's talking to this guy who we already revealed earlier in our little thing here is Sauron, and she's just chatting with him and trying to make him feel better. And you're like, woman, who do you think is sitting right there? We've all figured it out except you, And then the other elves, Númenóreans, they haven't figured it out because they're not looking for Sauron. They didn't expect him. But you are. You've been looking for him for a very long time. And now you found him. And you are not seeing him.
And there was almost like romantic tension there for part of that scene, in my opinion. It was kind of interesting. Maybe that's part of it, why she's maybe attracted to him, and so she is blinded by trying not to notice him or something. I don't know, but
yeah, it's he's pulled the wool over her eyes, definitely. Well, do you have any final thoughts on this one?
I liked this episode, which is funny. I am not an action scene boy by any stretch of the imagination. And so, but I think this was all cleverly done. And I actually found it more interesting than like Helm's Deep in the movies, right? Like, I mean, I thought this was a pretty, and there were several layers to it and several episodes to it. And I thought it was cool. Like, not episodes, but what I mean? Like several different movements to the battles. And I thought it was pretty cool. I enjoy. This may be one of my favorite episodes in the whole show. Yeah,
I think the fight scenes were good, except for when you couldn't see them. What's going on? But the fact that we were trying these tricks, the tricks are working, and then they kind of flip back on them. So we're getting. It's not just fighting, but things are happening that you have to keep track of. Like there's still plot happening. But you still get this wonderful extended talking scene between Galadriel and Adar, and even a little bit between Halbrand and Adar. So we still get some talking in there that is some really cool exchanges. All right, so if you enjoyed this episode, remember, just hit like and subscribe. You can also hit with the thumbs down if you really feel like it. And let us know in the comments what you thought about episode 6. I know there's a lot of people who don't like this series for various reasons. I just happen to like it. And I'm not sure how much better they could have done, literally, because of legal reasons and things they can't mention and can't do. It's like, you're not walking that legal tightrope, are you, when you have to write these scripts and figure out this production stuff? So, and of course, no one's ever given me $1 billion to spend on my pet project. So, but they're actually putting a lot of it on the screen. You see all that money, and it's gorgeous. Yeah, so, all right, we will get back to you with episode 7, and I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.